So hello and welcome to another video. Now I'm going to change the angle of this video and we're going to be looking directly at my monitor while I run through this. I've just been setting a few laps here at Bathurst, just trying out the Porsche, seeing how we can get it to handle. I will add this setup in the video and we'll have a little look over it later in the video, but predominantly I wanted to do this video all about frames per second. I've got a few notes that I've got here, and when it comes to getting the best out of the console itself, we're going to want to be looking really at the HDMI cable that we're using. Obviously there's a lot of other determining factors, what the monitor is capable of, but we all know the Xbox One X is currently doing it can do 4K at 30 frames per second, and the Series X will do 4K at 60 frames per second. Currently we're still waiting on this optimization, which is hopefully going to bring probably 4K at 120 frames per second, but that is going to depend a lot on the monitor that you've got. So if we just look at this little table that I've managed to find online, and if you look at the 4K section, and the Xbox can only push out 16:9 aspect ratio, so we're not going to benefit from anything else other than this center line. So using a 2.0 HDMI cable, you're going to be able to get 50 Hz, which is going to limit the frames per second that you're able to push out if that's the only cable you've got. So if you've got a monitor that's capable of 4K and say 240 Hz, but you're still only using a 2.0 HDMI cable, you're still only going to be able to get 60 frames per second. So that's when you start looking, if you're looking at running 4K at 120 frames per second, you're going to probably be looking at the region of about 800 to probably £1,000 for your monitor or your television. So it really does depend on whether you've got money to burn, really. If you wanted to be looking at around the 400 mark region for a monitor, and you're quite happy using 1440p, which I've always been happy with 1440p when it comes to gaming. I don't think we need to be that any more crystal than 1440p, to be honest. It's more about the frame rates. So if you still got that 2.0 cable, you're going to be able to then push out over 120 frames per second. But yeah, coming back to the monitor, so if you're wanting to spend around £400, I'm sure you'll be able to pick up a 1440p monitor with G-Sync or FreeSync, which will also help with any sort of frame stuttering or frame tearing. Frame tearing generally happens when, if for example you've got a monitor that's capable of 60 Hz, and then you set the frame rate to 120 frames per second, and you're only capable of 60 Hz, it's only going to refresh the page half as fast as it needs to, really. So you tend to get mid-frame tearing. It's trying to produce another image when the monitor can't keep up with it, which is the benefit really of G-Sync and FreeSync. If the Xbox is pushing out 120 frames per second and the monitor is set at 144 Hz, it'll reduce itself down to 120 frames per second. And if there's, like, say you've got really severe weather or something like that and loads of cars on the circuit, and the frame rate suddenly starts to drop, rather than suffering with screen tearing or problems rendering, it drops the frame rates as well. It drops the hertz, and it all sort of works together to stop any sort of mismatches between frame rates or frames per second and the hertz from the monitor. It just all syncs together. So for me, the 2560 by 1440p 16:9 ratio using a 2.0 HDMI cable is more than sufficient for me. I'm going to be able to get 120 frames, which I think is going to be the top end of gaming when it comes to the Series X consoles or even the PS5. I don't think, there's quite a few people mentioned 360 Hertz. It's just not really useful. Anything over 144 Hertz I don't particularly see is going to be massively useful. Maybe the 240 is worth getting if you've got the budget for it, but I think when it comes to sim racing, the human eye doesn't particularly see any faster than 90 frames per second. So I think as we move into these games that are getting optimized for 120 frames per second, having a 2.0 HDMI cable is going to be perfect, really. It's the absolute sweet spot, I think, when it comes to gaming. If you are one of those people that do want 4K, I definitely recommend getting a TV or monitor. If it's got 4K, having 2.1, or you're not going to be able to really benefit from the 120 frames per second without that particular cable. If you've got a 2.0 cable, you're only going to ever be able to get 60 frames per second. Be able to see it because of the bandwidth of the cable when you're trying to push 4K. But I'll just change the monitor around and I'll just position it behind me. I'm filming in 4K at the moment, or when we turn the monitor screen around, I don't think the front facing camera films in 4K, but I'll try and get some 4K footage and we'll change a few of the settings on the screen to see if you can actually see a noticeable difference in frame rates and the quality of the image. So let's just change this camera position. So having changed the position of the camera, I'm hoping you can see just up here in this top left hand corner that I'm running at 60 Hertz. Now that's not 60 frames, it doesn't drop from that, but it's running at 60 Hertz, the monitor. If we come to the menu, and I've filmed it like this because you can't actually see this menu when I'm recording any capture footage. So at the minute we're just recording straight on my iPhone 8 Plus. So if you come down to the settings and I come into my TV settings, you can see there that I've got the refresh rate set at 120 Hertz, but because it's a G-Sync monitor, it just reverts back to whatever the native output from the Xbox is, so that I know straight away that if a game runs in 120 frames per second, I'll see 120 in the top corner there. You can see when we come back to the normal screen, I've got 120 frames per second running now at 1440p. If I try and select 4K, it should automatically see there brings my hertz rate down to 60 because I'm only using a 2.0 cable, and even if I tried to select 120, it's going to bring the resolution down. It's just determining I haven't got a cable that will support 4K resolution and 120 Hertz or 120 frames per second. They are different and they are quite confusing, but if we bring the refresh rate down to 60 and we go back to the game, I don't think you'll see a noticeable difference in the quality of the image that we see on screen. As you can see there, it just pops up 60 Hertz, and I think that's quite a crisp image. So we're running at 1440p at 60 frames per second, 60 Hertz. And that's looking pretty good, I think. I mean, obviously if we ran the same thing on Xbox, it would be struggling and we'd be seeing it at 30 frames per second. So if we come back out of there and we come into the display options, and I can run it at 4K at 60 Hertz, and it almost gives a much deeper black as well, using the 4K version. But again, I don't think there's a noticeable difference in the picture quality itself. I'll try and put these side by side just to have a look at them and see what whether there is actually a noticeable difference, pixelation and stuff. But I can't particularly see it myself. I'm more than happy running the game at 1440p. So if we just come back out to the settings, and just for argument's sake, I put it to 120 Hertz. And I'll drop the resolution down to 1080p, and I'm hoping we can see a noticeable difference here. Although it's not a sizable difference, I think probably if you're looking at a still image you would notice more of a difference, but I think the monitor plays a big part in that, in the quality of the image that you're seeing, the colours, the depth of the colours. Almost there's quite a bit of stutter in there, I think. Obviously once the game's optimised, I think we're going to see a whole new game. I'd really like to think we are. But if we come down to the settings once again, and I'm going to put those back, I'll put them back to 1440p. And one of the other things that's worth looking at when it does hopefully become available, if we come back into the menu, if we push the menu button whilst you've got the game selected and come down to manage game and add-ons, there's a section in here called compatibility options, and if we click on there you can see that the high dynamic range is automatically functioning, but you can see this frames per second boost. Now as you can see over here, frames per second boost is not available for this game, but some games it is compatible, and you can increase that, and I don't know if you get 120 frames per second, but it is going to be an option, and I'd like to see that as an option as the game gets optimized for the new console. But yeah, hopefully that's kind of cleared things up a little bit. We will just quickly have a look over this setup. I'll just start a capture there, and we'll return to the garage. Just as a little freebie, just got the setup. Tyres obviously running around 27.8. Initially trying to get a bit of toe to get the car to turn in, and obviously using the camber to try and increase front grip. I've lowered the caster angle. I'd usually have this around 10, but just trying to reduce that strain through my shoulder and lighten the wheel a little bit. The rear of the car, obviously we're trying to get that straight line acceleration, so just slightly reduce the cambers at the rear, and using TC6 really, and ABS 2, and the engine map for the Porsche is always 8 on its maximum. Obviously brake pads, or brakes 1 and 2, or 1 throughout. The car does understeer quite a bit. So I've tended to soften the front of the car, especially through the anti-roll bars. Brake balance is a bit of an issue. I think coming into some of the corners it might be worth adjusting the brake balance while the car is moving. And again, through the suspension you can see it's fairly soft through the front of the car as opposed to the rear. I've not really carried too much or spent too much time. Obviously I'm still trying to rest his shoulder, but it gets the better of me when I sit in this seat. And obviously we've got just trying to get rid of some of this understeer with so much of this front splitter, but it is obviously going to negate any sort of top speed down the long straights. So maybe if you were using this setup during qualifying it'd be great, but in the race you're really going to struggle, I think, with straight line speed. I've not tried it in a race environment, but I'll just take it for a little drive, see what you think the handling looks like. I'm using 800 degrees of rotation on my wheel, and you can just see it in its full glory really. Not promising this will be brilliant. Always nice to see when you're up on your Delta. Still quite tricky. Little lift. Just carried too much speed through there. Really does struggle to get the car slowed down through that section. Just seems to suffer with so much understeer. Really did try just to brake a bit later, but it really does feel like the engine management is really stopping me coming down through the gears in this car. Go for one more. Must have had a terrible first corner on that fastest lap. Really slow to get back on the power. Just felt like I ran wide there. Very scruffy. Oh, just an absolute age coming through there. Just couldn't get the cars straight, and once you've sort of messed your line up into one corner, it really does have a compounding effect. Especially when you're a bit rusty. It was much better the first time round. I'd love to have seen a 201 to be honest, but so much understeer at the front. Slow down. Very hard to get through that section. Just no confidence in the car turning at all. Just so ginger on the power. This is what I'm like, you see. Just want to get a better lap time all the time. Oh, brilliant. Only 2/10 up on that first corner. It felt good. Oh no. I just don't think it should feel that hard to get through there. Definitely had a mighty run through there. Well, I'm afraid we're going to leave it there, guys. Hopefully you've seen the setup. I'll come back to the garage and we can have a little look at the setup, but yeah, don't think I'm going to be doing too many videos back to back to keep releasing them, just while I get this shoulder feeling better again. But yeah, it does look really nice. But I hope that's made it clear what your capabilities are, what you're needing for your frames per second. I know there's probably a way of hooking up to a PC, maybe to get the details as to what sort of frames per second you're running, unless you've got a frames per second counter that actually works on your monitor. Not particularly. So I can set that to frames per second, but you can see there it's in frame per second mode. Aspect ratio, fast response time, frames per second counter, but it's more like a, I won't call it a frames per second counter. It just shows the hertz. Oh. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'll quickly come back to the main menu, and just return to the garage just so you can see that setup again. It's not the best setup, it's not a setup I've spent hours doing as I would do. So yeah, just still got issues understeer wise, stability wise. It's not the best of setups, but it's one that's there. I'll save that as a work in progress. But yeah, thanks for watching. As always, ciao for now.